Alright, put the pitchforks down. I know what the thumbnail says, and you're expecting me to say that Kama's a good servant, but isn't worth summoning for. The summer banners are going to be a lot better, blah blah blah. And I would hope that even people that don't like my usual takes would understand that I'm not going to say that a servant as good as Kama, that has pretty much stood the test of time, has gotten no buffs whatsoever, and is as good as when she was when she dropped, is a bad servant. I'm not going to say that, or not even worth summoning. In fact, this video is more of the opposite, because even over on the JP version of the game that's in its 9th year, consider the fact that the gap between Kama coming out on JP and her current, position right now is longer than when the game launched to when she came out. I mean, she's a year 3 servant that is still holding up fairly well in year 9. Which is absolutely staggering. How many servants can you say are doing that without having a buff? I mean, even some servants like, say, Waver, that are still pretty good, at least got a buff to their NP that made them a little bit better, but most of these other old servants, like an Artoria, a Gilgamesh, they need those buffs to be competitive in the current meta. If you stripped Gilgamesh of all of his buffs, I hate to be the bearer of bad news as someone that played during year 1, but his NP is going to hit like a wet paper towel. It is not very good. My boy needs those buffs to be competitive, but Kama, with her very simplistic kit, pretty much gets the job done even to this day. So if anything, I kind of want to use this as a selling point for the servant of Kama, even though I did make the video saying I don't think you should summon on this banner, because realistically, summer is where the entire power of the year is concentrated, and even if you're not interested in all of those units, you have Castoria, Koyanskaya, Oberon returning at the end of the year, and if you already have them, that's great, but if you don't, you really should be trying to prioritize getting them, because that's just kind of how FGO works. You need the meta supports if you want to have a easy, fun time getting through the content. But I do think Kama does make a decent case to maybe throw a couple of summons at her, especially because if you're a older player or you just have a lot of servants leveled, you'll be getting a plethora of Saint Quartz thrown into your account during Anniversary, so you can kind of gamble a little bit on that. Again, I don't think that's the best idea, but hey, I took the same gamble for the Tron banners when Krimhild and Ruler Moriarty came out, because even though I'm pretty much free to play outside of GSSRs, I was willing to take the gamble that with all the servants I have leveled, I still stand a decent chance to win out on the summer banners, and I think Kama is one of those servants that has some worth in going for. So strap in, get comfortable. I'd appreciate if you like the video and you subscribe to the channel. It helps me out more than you know. And with that being said, let's start jumping right into this. Now, one of the common sentiments you'll see about Kama, and the reason that she is so good, is that among the assassins, she kind of just stands alone with how good she is. That's not really the case anymore with people like King Hassan now receiving multiple very, very strong buffs. I think they are rather competitive with one another. You can debate in the comments down below who you think is better between the two of them, but then, we've also gotten people like Tetskali Poco, who's very, very strong. Huion is a pretty decent servant as well. It's no longer this massive canyon between Kama and everybody else, but you do have to remember that when Kama dropped, she definitely was, by and large, the best assassin in the game. She was crazy good, and the assassins that followed her were good or decent, but were nowhere near her level. Gray, Horde, Assassin Okita, Kichi Hogan. Koyanskaya is a good support, but as an actual assassin, you're probably not using her as a DPS unless, again, you are that one guy that went for NP5. You have the Assassin Valkyries that are all pretty solid in their own right, but it's not like they're game-breakingly broken and they outclass all of the other assassins. And then even Huion, who I mentioned earlier, is fairly good, but I don't think she hits that same level of power that Kama has over the entire assassin class. It really is once Tets comes out that we start to see a little bit of competition, and then, King Hassan starts getting some buffs, and he also gets a little bit competitive. And sure, half of that is that Kama herself is really strong, but you also got to consider that all of the other assassins don't have the best kits. I mean, think about those comparison videos that I've been doing, with the Sabers and the Archers and the upcoming Lancer one. There's a lot of points of contention where you can argue that X servant is better than the Y servant over there because they have other things that they do, or they have similarities, but then they kind of branch into different niches, and it makes them a bit competitive. That didn't really exist for Kama. All of the other assassins, for lack of a better term, I don't want to call them bums, but they have flaws in their kit. Like, say for instance, Jack has very powerful quick cards and has a decent power mod, but she's got a year 1 kit. You know, there's not a whole lot that she's really doing in her kit, right? You have someone like Cleopatra, who I think is 2 different units, whether or not she gets the Imperial privilege or she doesn't. She's either really strong or not very good. You know, you run that risk. You do have people like MHX, who I think are fairly good in their own right, but they are lacking some of the modern things that Kama herself has, and that's stuff like a 50% massive battery. I do believe that the reason Kama still holds up the way that she is today is because for her time, she was massively overtuned to make her a good assassin. And if you don't know what that means, it essentially means that because the assassin class wasn't very good in and of itself, I mean, they have one of the lowest class modifiers, meaning that their class innately doesn't let them do a whole lot of damage, as opposed to, say, stuff like Avengers or Berserkers that have some of the highest class modifiers, which is why they hit extra hard on top of, say, being super effective or just being the angry class. But because the assassin class itself is not super great, and the other assassins around Kama were also not super great, to sell this new story event, I think they massively overtuned the kit, because 50% batteries were a thing back then, but they weren't the most common thing of all time. And then they gave her a really good niche against alter egos, which were becoming more and more common. I mean, she releases with Oku, which is right before a Lost Belt 4, which has one of the more annoying fights if you don't know it's coming up, the Limbo into Arjuna altar fight. And the only reason I had a real easy time with that was because Kama obliterated Limbo, who is an alter ego boss enemy, and then I could just run into fighting Arjuna altar and really didn't have to lose any momentum there. Because keep in mind, it's not just a power mod against them, she does double damage against them, not like the Berserker 1.5 against every class, like true double damage against them, and she takes half damage from them as well, so she mitigates her own weakness into them, because obviously alter egos have advantage against assassins, so she even negates that. And then she had an effect that was starting to become a little bit more popular, but she was really able to effectively use it, stacking a quick buff on her NP when she could pretty reliably fire her NP back to back to back, especially with Scotty having been released, you know, a bit before that, because that was Lost Belt 2. This is now closer to Lost Belt 4. And so even if your Kama maybe got some unlucky hands, or maybe your crits weren't going your way, you at least also had Scotty, who played really nice with Kama, where instead of Scotty kind of being this band-aid for quick units at the time, because keep in mind, some servants like Maid Alter or Skahog didn't have more recent buffs, and they could struggle to refund their NP at the time. Scotty was more of the band-aid for them. For Kama, instead of being a band-aid, she was more like an amp for her. And so it also just made her look really, really nice going into this quick meta. And you would think that, you know, now that we're kind of out of the quick meta, we're now, you know, transitioned out of the arts meta, where they're still pretty good, but really it's buster meta, right? You know, you want to just be doing raw NP farming, basically, and just doing massive amounts of damage. You would think that Kama's kind of lost her place, but remember that she's a single target unit with a 50% battery. That makes her very, very strong into multi-core setups, where you need somebody to obliterate a large rider, a berserker, or hey, even an alter ego. She's your girl for that. And I mean, she's also got stuff like the nice attack buff if you are reliant on crit cards, because, you know, maybe your Kama's only NP1 and lower investment, she does at least have somewhat of a crit damage buff. She's really self-sufficient, right? Not to also mention, she's one of the first servants to get the NP overcharge ability, which really helped her out a lot, because instead of starting off her stack of 20% quick damage, she would get 25%, which was just a little bit extra damage and a little bit of extra NP gain that just goes a long way. I mean, it's just a very, very well-built unit. I mean, she's also one of the few units that just has a guts that's not on a cooldown. Like, she gives herself an instance of a guts and it just sits there until you get the value out of it. I mean, if you have used Kama, you know that it is not uncommon for her to have her guts, and by the time the second skill comes back up, you still haven't used the guts. In fact, in one of the gameplays in the background right now, I think we do see that during the Kiara fight, where I have my guts and I just proc the skill again because I'm still sitting on the guts, might as well get the extra attack because I can afford to do it. She's just real good, man. She's just a very, very strong servant. So yeah, even though the thumbnail, you might say, oh, I think I got baited into him saying he was going to be bad. No, I'm just going to say that personally, I would save for Summer, because I think Summer's really insane. Even Archetype Earth is arguable, maybe like a must-summon character. She's a little bit weird. We'll talk about her more when we get a little closer to Anniversary. But while you might be able to run the gamble of summoning for her and then relying on all the Anniversary Saint Courts we get back, you could also wait for next year when she comes back for Paper Moon if you are more reliant on, say, going for Castoria, Koyanskaya, Oberon later on this year, because again, you do want to make sure you're picking up the meta supports, because I know it's annoying to hear all the time, but it will make your life a lot easier in playing the game. I know some people are hearing this and like, I know ZTL, I'm trying, but for newer players, it just is very, very nice if you can get these guys that can just make your farming life a lot easier. I know a lot of people start off and they're like, oh, I don't mind doing like a 5 or 6 turn clear, but eventually that's going to get old. Eventually you're going to want to do those 3 turn clears, especially when lottos start to roll around. But then again, I understand that next year also is bringing people like Draco, Tiamat, Kukulkan, and its own really good summer banners, but at least you know that there's another summoning option out there for Ordeal Call 1 next year when we should be getting that. But let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. You know, if you did go ahead and summon for Kama, I did see a couple of people in the Discord go summon for her, and thankfully, most of them were able to get him. I didn't see anybody that whiffed out on it. But hey, if you want to also join that Discord community, make sure you click that link down in the description down below and hit up that FGO chat. I mean, there's also a Star Rail, an Arc Knights, a Dokkan, there's memes, you know, do whatever you want down there. And if you want to see me play FGO live, then my Twitch is also linked down in the description down below if you want to see me do that every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday starting at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And sometimes I'll stream on the weekends or Tuesdays, Thursdays. Kind of depends if I'm working on like a longer video like those servant comparisons or that summer one that I did a couple of weeks ago. Sometimes I'm not able to stream on those days because getting all the info and different videos together takes a little bit longer than some of these more free-flowing videos. But yeah, that's going to be about it. I hope you guys have a nice rest of your day, and I'll catch y'all on the next one. Peace.